Hold on!
I never thought I'd believe Ernest Shackleton was lying until I witnessed what he described with my own eyes in those same South Atlantic waters. Picture this. You're staring at what you think is a break in the storm clouds, a glimpse of hope after days of hellish weather, and then your blood turns to ice as you realize you're looking at the white crest of a liquid mountain rising from the ocean floor. A wall of water so impossibly tall it could swallow a 4-story building whole and still have room for dessert. The year was 1919, and Shackleton's words still echo through maritime history like a warning bell no one wanted to hear. I called to the other men that the sky was clearing, and then a moment later I realized that what I had seen was not a rift in the clouds, but the white crest of an enormous wave. Can you imagine that moment? That split second when hope transforms into pure, primal terror? When your brain struggles to process something so massive it defies everything you thought you knew about the ocean. But here's what'll make your skin crawl. For over a century, the scientific community looked at testimonies like Shackleton's and basically said, "Nice story, mate, but that's physically impossible." They had their linear wave theory, their mathematical models, their absolute certainty that the ocean couldn't produce monsters larger than 9 meters. These weren't just skeptical scientists. They were men who'd staked their entire careers on the belief that nature followed predictable rules. The South Atlantic in 1919 was no playground. This was a stretch of water where icebergs drifted like floating cathedrals and storms could materialize out of nowhere with the fury of 1,000 demons. Shackleton and his crew were pushing through these waters in nothing more than a 7-meter whaler, essentially a wooden matchbox compared to what was hunting them beneath the surface. The air tasted of salt and desperation. The wind howled like it was personally offended by their presence, and every wave that crashed over their bow felt like nature testing their will to survive. That's when Shackleton saw it. What he initially mistook for hope was actually death incarnate rising from the depths. "It was a mighty upheaval of the ocean," he wrote. "White surged the foam of the breaking sea around us. We felt our boat lifted and flung forward like a cork in breaking surf." If you've ever been caught in a washing machine during the spin cycle, multiply that feeling by 1,000, and you might begin to understand what these men experienced. But what happened next changed everything about how we understand the ocean's capacity for absolute destruction. The scientific establishment of the early 20th century had a problem. They couldn't accept that their understanding of wave physics was fundamentally flawed. These were brilliant minds, men who dedicated their lives to understanding the natural world, yet they were about to be humbled by forces they dismissed as sailors' fantasies. Jules Dumont d'Urville, the French explorer, had reported 30-meter waves in the Indian Ocean decades earlier, backed by 3 eyewitnesses. The response? Public ridicule so severe that even the French Prime Minister voiced his disinterest in what he considered tall tales. Think about that for a second. Imagine witnessing something so terrifying, so impossibly massive that it rewrites everything you understand about reality, only to have the entire scientific community tell you it's impossible. It's like seeing a dragon and having everyone insist you saw a large pigeon. This wasn't just skepticism. This was institutional denial on a scale that would make conspiracy theorists blush. For decades, these giant waves remained relegated to maritime folklore, filed away with stories of sea monsters and ghost ships. But the ocean was keeping score, and it was about to present its evidence in the most brutal way possible. If this has happened to you, if you've ever witnessed something impossible that no one would believe, drop "witnessed" in the comments, because what I'm about to tell you next will validate every impossible thing you've ever seen. The turning point came not through scientific breakthrough, but through maritime tragedy. Between 1969 and 1994, something unprecedented was happening on the world's shipping lanes. 22 supercarriers, these massive modern vessels designed to withstand anything the ocean could throw at them, simply vanished. Not damaged, not disabled, completely erased from existence, taking 525 souls with them to the bottom of the sea. December 12, 1978, 3:10 a.m. The cargo ship MS München, one of the most advanced vessels of her time, issued a distress call from the North Atlantic. At over 240 meters long and built to withstand 15-meter waves, she was considered unsinkable, the maritime equivalent of a floating fortress. Hours later, she was gone. Completely gone. The largest search and rescue operation in North Atlantic history found nothing but empty ocean where a massive ship and her crew had existed just hours before. But the ocean wasn't done delivering evidence. When they finally recovered the München's lifeboat months later, what they found defied explanation. The life rafts, bolted to the ship 20 meters above the waterline, hadn't been lowered by the crew in an emergency evacuation. They'd been ripped from the ship's stern by a force so violent it bent steel hinges backward and snapped them like twigs. Something with a power of 100 tons per square meter had reached up from the ocean and torn these safety devices from their mounting points. Picture standing on the deck of that ship, looking up at those lifeboats 20 meters above your head. That's like looking up at a 6-story building. Now imagine a force powerful enough to reach that high and rip steel from steel as easily as you'd tear paper. What kind of monster lurks in the ocean with that kind of raw, devastating power? The forensic investigators knew what they were looking at, even if they couldn't officially say it yet. A rogue wave had emerged as the prime suspect in one of maritime history's most mysterious disasters. Even with evidence this compelling, the scientific community held firm. Their mathematical models said it was impossible, so it had to be impossible. But nature was preparing to deliver its most devastating rebuttal yet. If you think that's terrifying, wait until you hear how these liquid mountains finally forced science to acknowledge their existence. New Year's Day, 1995. While the rest of the world was nursing hangovers and making resolutions they'd never keep, the crew of the Dropner oil installation was fighting for survival in the Norwegian Sea. This wasn't some tropical paradise. This was 100 meters of churning, violent water that could swallow oil platforms whole if they weren't anchored to the ocean floor with the desperation of men who knew what lurked beneath. The Dropner platform was equipped with a downward-pointing laser designed to monitor sea conditions, essentially a mechanical eye that never blinked, never got tired, and never lied about what it saw. On this particular morning, that laser recorded something that would rewrite oceanography textbooks and force an entire scientific discipline to admit it had been catastrophically wrong for over a century. A 25.6-meter wave rose from the Norwegian Sea like a liquid skyscraper, towering above the platform with the casual indifference of a giant stepping over an anthill. To put this in perspective, the engineers who built Dropner had calculated that once every 10,000 years, once in 100 lifetimes, the North Sea might produce a 20-meter wave. They'd built accordingly, with the confidence of men who trusted their mathematics over maritime folklore. But this wave was 25.6 meters tall, more than twice the height of the surrounding 11-meter waves, rising from the ocean like something that had crawled out of humanity's deepest nightmares. The Dropner wave, as it came to be known, didn't just break scientific records. It shattered them so completely that oceanographers had to throw out decades of research and start over from scratch. From this moment forward, everything changed. The linear wave theory that had dominated scientific thinking for generations was revealed to be as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Ships that had been designed to withstand 15-meter waves were suddenly facing 30-meter liquid walls, and the results were predictably catastrophic. That same year, the Queen Elizabeth II was en route to New York when a 27-meter rogue wave struck the vessel with the fury of a liquid avalanche. The wave was so massive it smashed windows in the Grand Salon, 21 meters above the waterline. Think about that. This wave reached up 7 stories to punch through reinforced glass like it was tissue paper. The captain later said it looked like the ship was heading straight for the white cliffs of Dover. So imposing was the wall of water bearing down on them. But nature wasn't finished humbling human engineering. In 1997, a rogue wave tipped the cargo ship Tokyo Express, spilling 5 million Lego pieces into the Atlantic Ocean in what became known as the Great Lego Spill, the worst toy-related environmental disaster in history. The irony was almost poetic. Many of the Lego pieces were sea creature-themed, and they're still washing up on beaches nearly 25 years later, like plastic messages from the ocean's sense of humor. Anyone who's spent time on the water will understand the primal fear that comes from realizing you're not the apex predator in this environment. The ocean doesn't care about your engineering, your mathematics, or your confidence. It has been hiding monsters in plain sight for millennia, and it was finally ready to introduce them to modern science. The evidence kept mounting with the relentless persistence of the tide itself. In 2000, the British vessel RRS Discovery recorded a 30-meter rogue wave off the coast of Scotland. The ship was rigged with scientific instruments that measured everything with precision. This wasn't sailors' folklore. This was hard data that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Months later, when scientist Penny Holliday analyzed the data back at Southampton docks, she discovered they had encountered the largest waves ever scientifically recorded in the open ocean. The wave caused their research vessel to heel 28 degrees to port, roll 30 degrees back to starboard, and somehow survive what should have been a death sentence. Her conclusion was as terrifying as it was definitive. None of the state-of-the-art weather forecasts and wave models had predicted these behemoths. According to all theoretical models, waves of this size should never have existed. Yet they did exist, and they were just getting started. By 2007, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had compiled a catalogue of 50 historical maritime incidents most likely caused by rogue waves. The encounters weren't slowing down. They were accelerating into the 21st century with the momentum of an avalanche. Then came November 2020, when the ocean decided to show off. Off the coast of British Columbia, near Ucluelet, a monitoring buoy recorded something that made every previous rogue wave look like a gentle swell. A 17.6-meter wave rose from the Pacific, but here's what made scientists' blood run cold. This wave was 3 times taller than the surrounding waves. 3 times. Local news channels called it a once-in-a-millennium event, but the ocean was laughing at their mathematical models. The Ucluelet wave was as tall as a 4-story building and broke every record for size difference ever observed in a rogue wave. It was nature's way of saying, "You thought you understood me? Cute." This wasn't just another anomaly. This was the ocean flexing muscles humanity was only beginning to comprehend. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been on a boat when something impossible happened, because what I'm about to reveal next will explain why these liquid monsters form in the first place. And trust me, the science is more terrifying than the folklore ever was. The formation of rogue waves involves 3 main theories, and each one is more unsettling than the last. The first is constructive interference. Imagine multiple waves traveling at different speeds and directions, suddenly deciding to join forces like a aquatic flash mob. When their crests, troughs, and lengths align perfectly, they reinforce each other into a single monster wave that exists for just long enough to destroy whatever has the misfortune of being in its path. The second theory involves ocean currents acting like underwater highways that can amplify waves beyond all reasonable proportion. When storm-generated waves develop against the normal current direction, they can dynamically join together, forming these oceanic nightmares. The Gulf Stream and Agulhas Current are particularly notorious for this phenomenon, liquid conveyor belts that can transform ordinary waves into ship-killing behemoths. But the third theory is where things get truly mind-bending. We have to venture into quantum physics territory for a non-linear explanation that basically says waves can interact and exchange energy without any tangible outside cause. Random processes caused by smaller waves can create an unstable larger wave that literally feeds on the energy of waves around it, growing stronger until it becomes too unstable and collapses. Think of it as oceanic cannibalism, one wave devouring its smaller siblings until it becomes a temporary monster. Scientists demonstrated this possibility in 2012 using a Lego pirate ship in a fish tank, which somehow makes the whole concept both more scientific and more surreal. The conclusion? These things can just happen randomly, anywhere, at any time. Sleep tight, frequent travelers. The most terrifying aspect of rogue waves isn't their size, it's their unpredictability. Unlike the massive breaking waves that surfers challenge in places like Neza, Portugal, which form in predictable locations due to underwater topography, rogue waves can appear literally anywhere. They're the ocean's equivalent of lightning strikes, except lightning doesn't come in 30-meter walls of water. There are, however, certain areas where these monsters are more likely to prowl. South Africa's Agulhas Current is a rogue wave factory, responsible for sinking around 150 ships in recent decades. This current flows southward at speeds up to 5.8 miles per hour, and when it interacts with incoming waves at opposing angles, it can increase wave height by 60% in extreme cases. It's like a natural amplifier for ocean fury. The research suggests that strong, fast-moving currents create rogue wave focus points, areas where the ocean's energy gets concentrated like sunlight through a magnifying glass. This could explain some of the historical shipwrecks in and around the Bermuda Triangle, though I suspect the ocean doesn't need supernatural assistance to be absolutely terrifying. Modern technology is attempting to predict these oceanic assassins. Researchers at the University of Maryland claim they can predict rogue waves up to 5 minutes in advance using neural networks trained on data from millions of sea surface measurements. 5 minutes warning for a 30-meter wall of water. It's like getting a text message that says, "Dinosaur approaching," with just enough time to say goodbye to your loved ones. The good news, if you can call it that, is that encountering a rogue wave remains statistically unlikely. Only 210 rogue waves were reported over 7 years from 2011 to 2018. The last widely accepted ship sinking attributed to a rogue wave was the MS München back in 1978. Your chances of experiencing one are minimal, and your chances of surviving one are... Well, let's focus on the minimal encounter probability. But here's what keeps me awake some nights. For centuries, some of the most experienced sailors on Earth reported seeing these liquid mountains, and science dismissed them as fantasies. How many other impossible things are we currently dismissing because they don't fit our mathematical models? How many monsters are hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? The rogue waves of 1919 forced us to confront a humbling truth. The ocean doesn't care about our understanding, our engineering, or our confidence. It has been keeping secrets for millennia, and every now and then, it decides to share one. Ernest Shackleton saw something impossible in those South Atlantic waters, and it took us over a century to admit he was right. These waves aren't just meteorological phenomena. They're reminders that we're visitors in an environment that operates by rules we're still learning. Every time we think we've mastered the ocean, it produces something like the Ucluelet wave to remind us who's really in charge. And somewhere out there, in the depths we haven't fully explored, the next impossible wave is forming, waiting for its moment to rewrite our understanding of what's possible. If you've made it this far, you're probably wondering what other maritime mysteries are hiding beneath the surface, literally and figuratively. Drop "mystery" in the comments if you want me to dive deeper into the ocean's most terrifying secrets, because trust me, rogue waves are just the beginning of what's lurking down there.